morning. My name is Simon Miller with the LaRouche Organization, here today for your daily video update. Today is Wednesday, September 18th, 2024, and there are a series of developments that we should be discussing. Primary among which is how close we are to nuclear war. It's not as simple as the U.S. administration engaging in brinkmanship. It's not as simple as mutually assured destruction. As has been discussed repeatedly, the actual intent here is to shift away from a policy of mutually assured destruction and toward a policy of preemptive nuclear first strike. And this is evidenced by a number of factors, primary among which is Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's dedication to Ukraine. Primarily, they are actively considering, in the highest levels of U.S. governance, if it can be so called, to allow long-range missiles into Ukraine for the use of attacks against Russia. Putin has very clearly said that this would mean that NATO countries are at war with Russia and they would respond accordingly. And although we've been reporting on this phenomena, this push closer and closer to nuclear war for months now, it's only now becoming the center of public discourse because of a couple factors. First, you do have the International Peace Coalition. You have senior intelligence officials, senior statesmen, peace activists, and other people from around the world, but also specifically here in the United States, who are coming out publicly and saying, look, we are close to nuclear war, and we only have a few chances to stop it, and we have to stop it, and this is how. Okay, and that's been going on for over a year now. And that has an effect, even if you don't see NBC or whatever other mainstream publication, Fox or CNN, even if you don't see them reporting it, the circles that those people are in, when it's like when you drop a pebble in a lake, and even though the pebble is small, even though nobody's viewing the videos, there's not thousands of people viewing the videos, that pebble creates a ripple effect. And that ripple effect is being felt. But another factor that might in fact be related to that is Robert Kennedy Jr. and Donald Trump Jr., who recently did a joint op-ed for The Hill. I believe that was yesterday, that was Tuesday. And what they said was that we need to negotiate diplomatically with Russia, that U.S. statesmen are playing with fire and trying to enact a policy of brinkmanship, that the people who are saying that Putin is bluffing, which is most of the mainstream analysts, are confusing restraint for weakness. And they say that if Trump got into office, they would do everything in their power to negotiate with Moscow to end the war, which is exactly what needs to happen. But the sad thing is that you have other sort of vultures revolving around the Trump campaign, because that voice that was displayed by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Donald Trump Jr. is a minority in the Republican Party. There are other anti-war voices in the Republican Party and around the Trump campaign, Tulsi Gabbard, for instance. However, overall, they're a minority. The establishment, the deep state elements, the British elements, such as Mike Pompeo, who are still orbiting the campaign, are giving interviews, such as to Pravda Ukraine, where Mike Pompeo says that we need to essentially bolster Ukraine so much that Russia decides that it's not worth it to continue the war. But that's the logic of someone who hasn't been listening to repeated Russian statements about why would we allow the world to exist without Russia in it? If you're going to push Russia to the brink of existence or non-existence, then we're going to do the same for the world. Why would we let the West destroy Russia? That's what Russia's been saying. They've been saying every single time that you send new guns, new tanks, new long-range, new mid-range missiles, and what have you, every single time you push closer to posing an existential threat to Russia, and therefore to a nuclear response in Ukraine or elsewhere. So the logic of Mike Pompeo and the neocon British war faction of the Republican Party, that still exists and in fact is likely the majority. However, that is not meant to discredit Donald Trump. I mean, it's very clear now to anybody who's thinking that despite Donald Trump's flaws, despite the fact that Donald Trump is really not a good candidate, he's not an ideal candidate, certainly, he's not even independent. Despite that, his campaign has somehow coalesced the only mainstream anti-war voices around himself. And they're arguing for exactly what we need to do, at least in this one particular regard, which is to negotiate with Russia, negotiate with Moscow, and the nuclear war drive. But the nuclear war drive is inherently connected. This Ukraine conflict is inherently connected to what's going on with Israel, Gaza. The debate is ongoing to invoke Article 377 at the UN General Assembly, whereby if there is one of the 5 permanent Security Council members blocking the attempts at restoring peace, in this case in Gaza, then you can bring that vote over to the General Assembly, and if you get a 2/3 majority with the 377 vote, you can vote with the same power that the Security Council has to restore peace in that area. Now, what does it mean? Does it mean it's binding? Does it mean the conflict's going to stop if it goes through? We really don't know. But yesterday there were a huge number of debates. That is Tuesday the 17th. And today they are doing the vote. Today is the vote on UN General Assembly Article 377 with regards to Israel-Gaza. And if that vote goes successfully, which it likely will, given the fact that yesterday only 2 countries, out of every single nation on earth, 2 countries argued against Article 377. They were Israel and the United States. So if that vote goes well, despite the disgusting things that U.S. so-called leaders said, if that vote goes well, we could very well see the next step in accordance with the trend of history, the trend of universal history, which is development. Because we just finished the FOCAC forum earlier this month. And the FOCAC forum, the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, represented the highest level, I believe the highest level so far, development forum hosted by a major party in international politics, as well as the Eastern Economic Forum, which itself was also very high level. But the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation represented China saying, look, we have every African nation here except for one. And not only are we going to give you money, and not only are we going to talk about development projects, not only are we going to talk about fresh water and power and streets and bridges and every other form of infrastructure you can think of. Not only are we going to do that, we are also going to specifically mention that the reason the wars are happening is because of the way that the global south has been treated, because of the lack of development. Ukraine and Gaza is the focal point. It is the edge of the knife of a much larger weapon against the people of humanity. The depopulation, anti-development, anti-growth superstructure that has arisen out of the old world British aristocracy and the Anglo-American aristocracy here in the United States. So a 377 vote, especially with upcoming talks, as mentioned by Antonio Guterres months back, upcoming talks about African development in the UN. It means that there's some sort of accordance where international law is stepping in to actually do what it's intended to do, which is prevent all-out nuclear annihilation. Why was the UN founded in the first place? It was founded because after World War II, they needed a way to prevent World War III. They wanted peace among nations. They wanted global development. It has failed to live up to that. But now it has a chance to do so with this Article 377 vote. All of this being said, if you take the picture as a whole, you have a crackdown on anti-war voices in the United States, which is continuing. You have this second assassination attempt against Donald Trump. That's the day before his son and close associate, Robert Kennedy Jr., put out an op-ed saying that we need to negotiate with Moscow. The day before that, there was a second assassination attempt on Donald Trump's life. But that's only a continuation of a long intelligence attack, not only just on Donald Trump, but on dozens of other anti-war voices in the United States, Scott Ritter chief among them. And this Article 377 vote fits perfectly within that kind of paradigm, because the United States was the only country, other than Israel itself, who argued against Article 377. The international community has decided. The international community has decided to negotiate with Moscow, end the war against Gaza, and let's develop. That is the trend of history. That is the paradigm, the new paradigm. And it already exists. There are just war hawks, neocons, and neoliberals in Washington, D.C., in London, and on Wall Street who refuse to catch up to that fact. So all of this being said, this is not a call just for you to go and vote for Donald Trump. That is not enough. That is not sufficient. If you're watching this right now, it means that you've already taken steps to becoming a knowledgeable human being and a loving human being who has compassion for humanity and wants to see humanity develop and grow. So therefore, I believe you have a moral obligation to join the International Peace Coalition every Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We already talked about what the International Peace Coalition is, and I mentioned it at the end of every single video. But you must join. You must watch it. You must engage with it. This is the highest level of peace activism, of intelligence activism that you could possibly think of. You must support the independent campaigns of Diane, Sarah, and Jose Vega that are truly, truly independent. They're not beholden to any sort of establishment or deep state, as is the case with Donald Trump, unfortunately, since he's running in the Republican Party. And furthermore, what you need to do is remain optimistic. Because in times like these, where it seems like the world is coming down around you, where you're getting closer to nuclear war, none of your leadership cares, they're pushing brinkmanship, there's people shooting at the only person who actually stands up to it, as far as the mainstream discourse is concerned. When you have the United States arguing in favor of horrible Nazi-like atrocities at the UN stage in front of every country on earth. When you're living in the middle of that, if you're a US citizen right now, it is way too easy to just check out. And yeah, you can vote for Donald Trump. And yeah, you can join even the IPC, which is a fantastic move. Yes, you can even donate to Diane, Sarah, and Jose Vega. You can do all of that, but you could still be wrong up here. You could still be down and out. You can still get beaten down. But you can't let that happen. You have to remain optimistic. You have to remain with a hopeful zeal, dedicated to humanity.